Hello, welcome to the Marty O'Donnell Show. This week is going to be very different than what I was expecting. My special guest today is Dr. Charles Cornish Dale, and you might know him better as the RAW EGG Nationalist. He is a British scholar. His doctorate is, and I find this out, I'm telling you now because I thought it was amazing. It was a complete surprise to me. His doctorate is from Oxford, and he is a specialist in medieval history, and specifically the Renaissance, not the Renaissance, but the Reformation in a small Middle English town, which I think is spectacular. So we had a discussion that I never thought was going to happen. He has been accused of many weird, fascist, nationalist, white nationalist, misogynist, you name it. He's been accused of everything. And of course, I'm being accused of these things too. So I had to talk to him to find out what's true and what's not true. And I think the conversation was pretty fascinating. I hope you enjoy it. And here it is. All right, everybody, this is the Marty O'Donnell Show, and my guest today is probably going to be another one of those sort of marriages made in heaven. Nobody will expect this confluence of people coming together. Today, my guest is. Now, I believe you have doctor in front of your name. Is that correct, Dr. Charles Cornish Dale?
It's true, yeah, I do.
What's your doctorate in? Is it a doctorate of something, or are you
It's
like a medical guy?
No, I'm not. I'm not a medical guy, although I do talk a lot about health and fitness. I'm actually a medieval. I'm a medieval historian.
No, you're kidding me.
Nope, nope, it's true. From Oxford. That's right. That's where I got my DPhil. Oxford. Yeah,
Well, then you probably know who C.S. Lewis is.
I do. Yeah, I do.
So I'm a huge C.S. Lewis fan, and I was just talking to somebody today about a book called The Discarded Image, which is his last book. Do you know this book that I'm talking about?
I haven't actually. I mean, I've read a certain amount of C.S. Lewis, Four Types of Love, that kind of thing. His commentary on Milton's Paradise Lost, but I haven't read that book. No.
It's the last book that he wrote. It's called The Discarded Image, and it's all about sort of explaining. See, I never expected that we were going to start here, but this is the way this show goes. It's all about explaining the fact that there was a medieval, and not just medieval, but a historic, like for centuries, eons, really, for thousands of years, there was a view of the known universe that had to do with what we could see with our, the naked eye in the night sky, and that's where we get the idea of the spheres and the planets, which are moving dots of light. Either the planets are, wandering stars, and the mythology that grew up around the sort of medieval understanding of the universe, or the cosmos, or whatever you want to call it, was so prevalent among so many, especially Western nations, that you can't really study medieval literature without really understanding the way everybody thought about the heavens, the seven heavens, and the stars and the planets and the whole thing. So that's what the discarded image is all about. He's basically saying once we discarded that and said we have a more scientific explanation, basically, if people who only know the current scientific explanation of the galaxy and the universe, there will be a lot of literature and poetry and music and art that they just won't understand, that comes from centuries and centuries of Western culture. So anyway, I love that book for that reason. It's very fascinating.
Definitely read that. I mean, that seems to be a touchstone of a lot of his thinking. Actually, that we've discarded a much more profound way of thinking and approaching the universe, and we've sort of impoverished our lives, and impoverished our moral sense actually by forgetting these kind of grander, sort of time-tested conceptions of what it actually means to live a good life, what it means to be part of the universe. Yeah, I'll definitely read that, Marty.
Well, you gave a synopsis, which is pretty perfect of what he was doing, but that is sort of the C.S. Lewis ethos, right? I mean, that's what he championed a lot. And I love. There's a part in this book where he says something like, "Just because the the image of the universe turned out to be incorrect, that wasn't the most important thing about it."
Mm.
It's
Yeah.
sort of like it doesn't matter if it's scientifically accurate. It was more profound and more deeply accurate in many other ways, and
Well,
that's what we have to
yeah. Well,
study.
we've kind of lost a sense of the place of metaphor and the place of myth in particular. And yes, I mean something can be literally untrue. You could say the entirety of Genesis is literally untrue if you want to,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
metaphorically as a mythical structure, it tells us all sorts of things about the universe, about man's nature, man's relationship to God, to the cosmos, to nature, whatever you want to call it. So yeah. I mean, I do like C.S. Lewis, and you've sold the book for me.
Okay, good. It's not a very long book. It's his last book, and I think it inspired me to, well, amongst a few other things, to write a suite of music called Music of the Spheres,
Nice.
and I based it on the seven known spheres of the medieval cosmos, which was, the moon and the sun are two of the first spheres because
Mm.
they're the same as any other planet. They were still considered planets because they were moving spheres in the sky. They didn't follow the rest of the crystal sphere that the stars were embedded in. I just love the way the imagery is, and then there's all the different Greek gods and Roman gods that are based on the seven planets and the 7 days of the week, and there's so many great, like you say, there's metaphor like up the wazoo that they had, and you really don't understand a lot of Western culture without understanding that. So I think it's fascinating. How did you get into? How did that become your major? What's the deal on that?
Well, so I mean, I'm lucky enough. I'm English, if you couldn't tell, and I was lucky.
English.
Yeah, I was.
I love your name, Cornish Dale. Like you can't be more English than that name. That's amazing. But go
Yeah,
ahead.
it's a very silly, very English name. But I mean, I was lucky enough, to grow up in a very beautiful English village in the countryside, and I mean, there are tens of thousands of villages across Britain, and every single one has a medieval church in it, and
Mm,
so I mean, I was lucky enough to grow up surrounded by history, very ancient history. I mean, my village had a Norman church, parts of which actually were Saxon, so it was, it's 1,000 years old. This church, so
amazing.
yeah, I just grew up loving history. I just grew up with a great reverence for the past, for old things, and a kind of deep desire to try and understand the past and to situate myself within it as well. I mean, it's always these things. I think it's a journey of discovery, and when you're learning about the past, especially your own country's past, you're learning about yourself. And so yeah, so I ended up doing history as an undergraduate, and then I specialised particularly in medieval history, and then I came to do this PhD in medieval history, writing about the Reformation, about religious change, um, and that sort of stuff.
Well, I would never. Somehow, this part of your biography is not getting passed around enough.
No,
So
no, it isn't. It's funny, but
you
yeah.
realize how evil you are, right? I mean, you acknowledge the evilness of your very existence. I It's funny when I. Well, first of all, why are you on my show? Why did you accept this invitation? I would love to know.
I like talking to people. I like talking to people, and I
Okay.
like I like your music, and
Oh, you do? Okay. Well, I didn't know if you were aware of the Halo and the music and
but
stuff like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
So,
I played a
oh,
lot of Halo. Halo was a formative part of my sort of teenage, early 20s. Yeah, I'm very familiar with Halo.
okay. All right. Well, as you know, I kind of rely heavily on, I borrow from some medieval
Mm,
monk chants. None of the monk chants are actually, as far as I know, are from the medieval period. It's just, but I was in a early Renaissance and medieval music class when I was
nice.
in at grad school, and I always just fell in love with, Renaissance counterpoint, and then also the Liber Usualis, which has all these chants in it, and the chants are the basis. Those chant melodies are the basis of so much subsequent music, And so I was in a group that sang monk chants and studied the neumes. And so I would dip into that memory periodically when it became appropriate in my mind, at least for things. Somehow, a sci-fi Halo shooter universe, somehow monk chant came right into my head. Like I'm going to put that in there just to screw with people.
It fits amazingly well. I mean, it's a kind of it's an iconic part of the Halo, kind of experience is that the title screen loads and you've got the sort of Gregorian type chanting. I mean, I'm a guitar player, so I loved when Steve Vai was on. I think the Halo 2 soundtrack.
Halo 2. Yeah, Halo 2. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's cool. Yeah, I mean that was a fun thing not only did we have Gregorian chant monks and this juxtaposed with a big orchestra, and then on top of that for Halo 2 we piled on Steve Vai, which was another just a blast. I mean it was so much fun, and he got the vibe immediately and did just amazing stuff. I had so much fun working on that music, so I'm glad you're aware of it. That's great. But let's get back to your story. So PhD in medieval. So like the Reformation is actually a big part of your expertise. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so the PhD was about the Reformation. So this great schism that happened beginning in the sort of early 16th century with Martin Luther nailing his 95 theses to the door of the cathedral in Wittenberg, and but my specific focus actually in the PhD was one town in England, and it's a town actually very near where I'm from in Dorset, which is a rural county in southwest England, and this town has amazing medieval records that nobody had actually really touched until I started to look at them. People knew
Wow.
people knew they were there, and they knew kind of what was in them and what you might be able to do with them, but nobody had ever really done anything with them. So I was the first person to touch a lot of these records, the first person really to look at them in detail and chart trends, and I was looking really at popular religion and how ordinary people experience the Reformation, because we tend to think of the Reformation as this grand historical process, which of course it was, and it involved kings and popes and bishops, and there was the 30 Years' War, and I mean we're talking about Christendom breaking apart and new
Yeah.
polities forming and all this kind of stuff, but also you've got ordinary people and their experience of religion was changing. England goes from being part of the Roman Church to a national church with the king as its leader, and he says what goes, or the king or queen even says what goes, and you have all these kind of changes to the way that people are supposed to do religion. They're not supposed to venerate the saints anymore. The mass has a totally different meaning. You're not supposed to have music in church. You're not supposed to have music in church. I mean, that was a big change that happened.
Mm.
You had all of these very interesting changes to the role of music, in which I actually wrote about. I did a whole chapter of my PhD on church music. But
Man, you should send that to me. I'd love to read it.
I
Maybe
will.
it's pretty heady stuff, but I would love to read something that goes into that depth. That's great.
Yeah, it's online. It's on the you can PhDs now when they're submitted at Oxford, and I'm sure at other universities as well. Then they go online, so you deposit
Okay.
you deposit an electronic copy, so anybody can read it. So I will send you the link. But
All right, cool.
but yeah, the music stuff is interesting because music had been a very big part of medieval worship, and it's still a very big part of Catholic worship.
Hmm.
But Protestant reformers were, for the most part, quite suspicious of music because they didn't know what music meant, and so they were, I mean, the Reformed churches, Lutheranism, and also the Reformed churches. Then they were focused on preaching in particular, on the Word of God. Like the
Yeah.
general
Right.
model was that you should go to as many sermons as possible. You should listen to skilled preachers preaching the gospel, explaining what the word of God actually is and means. And so, if you go to church because you like the music,
Right.
that's actually not a
It's
very
idolatry. Yeah.
it yes, I mean, and some of the Protestant and Lutherans did call it idolatry, but they were
Hmm.
just ambiguous about it. Like, how do you what instruction does it provide? So the kinds of music that you actually get for the most part in kind of reformed Christianity is psalm singing, and that's something that you still get in Scotland actually, and in
Hmm.
Switzerland and other places like that, where people are just singing psalms. And
Right. Psalmody. Yeah.
yeah, and the meaning of a psalm is obvious because there are words, whereas you've got organ music. I mean, what does organ music mean?
Right. That's interesting. So I grew up Protestant, and I got my music degree at the Conservatory of Wheaton College, which is, very an evangelical place. So I understand the sort of the Protestant Vatican, which is what we called Wheaton,
Mm.
because that's where Billy Graham went, and there's many things that circle around Wheaton. But years later, when I got more into, like, as a career, I was, a musician, and there was this always been this sort of tension between what's right kind of music in churches and what's the wrong kind of music. And there's always fights between, people who want this kind of music and people who want this kind of music. And those music fights get really ridiculously harsh, and they seem very unchristian to have fights over music for me anyway. So I would try to stay away from a lot of that. But when I started a commercial music company, we had a slogan which we used, and it was on our coffee mugs, and it has lots of different multiple meanings for me. And it was just not by words alone.
Mm.
And that was on my mug, and that was on our t-shirts or whatever. Like, that was our slogan, not by words alone. And of course, when we were doing commercials, it was basically like, hey, you can't just sell stuff by telling people. You need our music too. So I always felt like music adds is another language that, especially words, music without words has a meaning that you can't explain.
Mm.
You can sort of use words to describe what's happening music with the music, but you'll never be able to really explain the music without just listening to it as music. And then it speaks to everybody slightly differently. And that's, I think, the scary part for the where is it written
Mm.
Protestants who, like, they want to see it in black and white and, with the jots and tittles or whatever,
Mm.
right? So I always felt like, yeah, yeah, you're not going to get that. God didn't allow us to have that much rational brain for that. We have to accept something on a deeper, different level, spiritual level,
Mm.
frankly.
Well, it's quite noticeable as well, actually, that I mean, the Church of England has been in kind of terminal decline in the UK for a long time, or in England in particular, for a long time. But one thing that isn't in decline is evensong. So
Mm.
people love to go to evensong. They love the music, really. They love the fact that it's interactive and that it has this very heavy musical component, and you can just sort of appreciate the beauty of the service without necessarily sort of subscribing to the beliefs, without necessarily making any sort of verbal commitments or anything like that. You can just go and you can kind of feel like you are experiencing the transcendent in some sense, and
Hmm.
that's what people like. I mean, I think it's definitely it's wrong um, to write that off and to say, that this isn't a valuable aspect actually of worship, because it is, and it really grabs people. I mean, the setting, the music, people love it. People love it.
Well, that's really fascinating because a few years ago, my wife, who was a choral director, she has her master's in choral music, decided to. She was we were both sort of frustrated with several different Protestant churches we were going to, and she was a choir director for years within the Covenant Church, which comes from the Swedish Covenant, which is an outgrowth of Lutheranism. And that saying is a Swedish Covenant saying, where is it written? And so there was always, as choir director, she was always running into, factions with, even in small churches, with people who, like, had very strong opinions about music. And So that was always very interesting. But years later, after we moved to Seattle, she decided to check out the Catholic Church, and then she went through RCIA and she did the whole thing, and lo and behold, now she's Catholic. So a few years ago, I thought, well, I can't continue in a way where I go to church with her, she takes communion, and I don't. And I felt like communion was an important enough sacrament that I decided I was going to check out the Catholic Church. I went through RCIA, and now I'm Catholic. So I went on this journey from pretty hardcore Protestantism and evangelical and the whole thing, and now I'm Catholic. And I'm very happy with. It's funny because it's not as though I feel like, at least in the parish that we're in, that the music is all that great. But the one thing I know about some of the traditions is they just go back so
Yeah.
far. So you can just sort of relax into not getting surprised every week by some strange thing that just sort of comes out of nowhere. And it's not important to go to worship services and be relaxed. That's not my point. But I just am glad that we're not getting surprised by things. We
Yeah.
started getting sort of surprised by Protestant and even Episcopal churches were doing stuff that just were like, what has happened?
Yes.
So
Yeah. Well, I think that's evident across the Western world. It's not just America. I mean, that's happening in Europe too. And it is very noticeable actually that that people, there is a great yearning, I think, for spirituality and for some kind of return, I think, to Christian worship. But it's interesting, actually, a lot of people are plumping for Catholicism, and then even if Catholicism doesn't satisfy them, they're going for like Russian and Greek Orthodox. Because
Orthodox, yeah, a good friend of mine is Orthodox now, which is we both were in the same church back in suburbs of Chicago, and we've stayed friends. He's now Greek Orthodox, which is pretty interesting.
well, there's a sense, I think, with Orthodox that really, the main kind of theological issues in Orthodoxy were settled over 1,000 years ago. There hasn't really
Right.
been a great deal of theological
1055 or
debate.
something.
Yeah, and what it is the focus on the liturgy. You've got the set forms. It's all set down. It's not going to change. You're not going to have a Vatican II where suddenly they change the language of the liturgy. Nothing like that is going to happen. You can trace it right the way back to the beginning, not with too much difficulty. And so I think that people who are sort of wanting the real thing are almost invariably turning either to kind of breakaway forms of Catholicism or even Orthodoxy, which is
Yeah.
interesting, because Orthodoxy, obviously, there's no history of Orthodoxy in Western Europe. I mean, it's not like Orthodoxy was the religion of Western Europe. It's always been the religion of Eastern Europe and Russia, which is an interesting development, very interesting development.
Yes. Yeah. So are you sort of an outside observer, or are you in have you chosen one to like be a fan of?
Well, so I'm baptized Church of England. So I was
Okay.
baptized as a child. Not that that, not that that really means anything. You're a member of the
It
Church of
does.
England.
It does.
I
Yeah.
mean, it can do. I think it can do, but I mean, I went to a Christian primary school, elementary school. I mean, I'm used to being in church. I mean, I do obviously consider myself culturally a Christian. At various different times, I've tried quite hard to believe sincerely. I mean, when I was actually doing my PhD, then I thought, you know what, I'm writing about you know ordinary experience of Christianity as it changed through the Reformation. I really do need to immerse myself in this topic, not just looking at the medieval sources, but also just experiencing Christianity, experiencing religion. So I was going a lot to church services in Oxford, in particular, and going to sort of like Bible meetings, to talk about theology and all that kind of stuff. It had quite a profound effect on me, but I fundamentally feel like I'm going to need to have some kind of Damascene moment, actually, really to bring me back into the fold. I've tried to believe, and I think I'm possibly a little bit too cerebral at times, maybe to put my doubts aside. I think I need something. I need something to happen to me that makes me think, yeah, you know, God's got a hold of me.
Well, I'll recommend one more C.S. Lewis book. Then it's
Please.
called Surprised by Joy.
Nice.
If you, yeah, it's called Surprised by Joy. It is the story of his conversion. He calls himself the most reluctant convert in all of England. So it's an amazing journey story, and you might get a kick out of it. So he had one of those moments. So
Well,
he
that's two
describes it pretty
books.
well. It's a
Two
good book.
books for me
It's
to
two books.
read, which is nice. Yeah, it's always nice to add to the reading list, but they'll go towards the top actually because they sound good.
Good. Well, I appreciate that. Well, I did. Of course, I had no idea. I know you as the Raw Egg Nationalist, which is, hilarious, at least to me. I don't know, like where you came up with that, but it is a funny Twitter name,
Mm.
and you've gotten huge amounts of followers and very disparate followers too. I mean, and you have some very. It doesn't. Is JD Vance following you or something like that? Is that what I saw?
Yeah, he is. Yeah, yeah, he's been
Okay.
following
And
me for a
and
while.
RFK Jr. is he one too, or
I don't
have you
know. I
just sort
don't
of?
know whether he follows me, but I was in a documentary with him. I was in a Tucker Carlson documentary with him, so he obviously
Is that
follows.
the end of men?
Yeah, that was 2022. That was when things really started to go pretty crazy for me. That was in the this Tucker Carlson documentary about testosterone decline, fertility decline, sort of crisis of masculinity. I went on Tucker Carlson's show as well, which was kind of surreal. And yeah, that's when I really blew up. Was when
Was he still on Fox at that
he
point, or was
was.
he?
Yeah, yeah, he
Okay,
was.
all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I vaguely remember that time period where this was starting, where it like there was this crisis of testosterone decrease in the male population, or the human population, and fertility rates going down, and much of that has been confirmed in the years
Mm,
since, as far as I know.
mm,
Now, let me ask you this, because I feel like I've talked to a few other people about the epistemological crisis that we have. It is so hard to know what's true.
mm. Yes, it is.
And you can quote a bunch of studies, but we're now in a state where we're always like, really? Well, how do we know that study is true? And how do we know that that organization has integrity? And we're in a time where it's like determining what is true is very, very difficult. How are you dealing with that?
Yeah. I mean, there's a replication crisis in the sciences for starters, and this has been confirmed. Where they look at papers and they try to replicate their findings and they can't, and
Mm,
it's some absurd proportion of papers, and particularly I think in the social sciences. So let's say like social psychology, personality psychology. You'll have reams and reams of papers, and then like 75% of them you just cannot replicate the findings, which suggests that they're wrong. But then you also have the fact that actually you've got, especially with health, something that I talk about all the time. You've got huge amounts of money being poured into research by corporations, by processed food manufacturers. I mean, they pay money to people to say that, like processed food isn't unhealthy. Processed food doesn't make you overweight. The additives in processed food aren't unhealthy. They don't affect your gut biome. They don't have any links to autism. All this kind of stuff. And so it's very very hard. You have to pay very close attention, not only to what the findings of a study are, but also who's funding the study. What's the study in response to? How's it being used socially? And you see with the media in particular that studies get misreported. It happens all the time. They'll cherry pick some particular small conclusion and they'll make that the story, and miss out a whole load of other much more important stuff. So yeah, it's a very difficult time actually to know what is true and what isn't, and you have to, yeah, you have to know your stuff. You have to pay attention, and you really have to dig, and you really have to try to think for yourself. because a lot of what you're presented with is very very partisan, and it's I mean it's amazing really actually to look at something like this Make America Healthy Again movement, and to think that being healthy now is being presented as a right wing thing. It's kind of crazy though. You'd think, oh,
It is
this
crazy.
this
Yes.
should be a unifying issue. Like we should all want people to be healthy, and especially children. We should, like children. I mean, come on, like we all have an interest in children eating well and being healthy and exercising. Apparently not. So it's a very strange time, and there doesn't actually seem to be, as far as I can see, any sign that it's going to change anytime soon. I actually think the polarization will get worse before it gets
Yeah.
better.
Yeah, I was just going to say the I've never seen it so the society so polarized, and it seems like the COVID crisis
Mm.
did not help
No,
any of this at all
no,
because it got politicized so quickly, and it just whatever the schism was already just widened beyond belief to the point where I've seen a woman interviewed who was wearing a mask, and at some point she took it off. She goes, "Well, if I take off my mask, I don't want to have people think I'm Republican."
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it's like if you wear a mask, you're a Democrat, and if you don't wear a mask, you're a Republican. And I'm like, how in the world did we get to this point? It is so crazy.
Well, the thing about the pandemic as well, I think, is that there's an added level of complexity there because actually what you've got um, kind of responsibility and culpability for bad things that happened, and people not wanting to
Hmm.
admit that they were wrong and not wanting
Right.
to admit that they said crazy things like people who don't get vaccinated should be kept under house arrest. I mean, family friends of mine said that about me because I didn't get vaccinated. Someone actually said to my mother, Charlie should not be allowed out of the house until he gets vaccinated. I mean, and that was ordinary people saying that. I mean,
Right.
so
Right.
I mean, there's this level of culpability as well where people are just like, no, I'm not going to admit that I was wrong. I'm going to persist in this, and I mean, it really has kind of torn apart the fabric of society. I mean, I don't think we should underestimate just how much of a, I mean, it was a catastrophe, really. I think the
Yeah,
pandemic.
totally. Well, one of the I don't know if I've talked about this a couple of times, but I have a different understanding now of the fable "The Boy Who Cried Wolf,"
Mm,
which I always sort of thought the moral of the story was, don't lie or people won't believe you.
mm,
But I feel like that's too on the nose. I think the real moral of the story is once the people lose trust, the sheep die.
mm. Yeah, yeah, that's a good way of
And
putting it.
I'm like, yeah, it's like that's the end of the story. The climax of the tragedy of that story is that the sheep die. And they were the innocent. I mean, I love the fact that it's sheep because, there's nothing more innocent in literature than sheep, right?
Yeah,
Symbolically. And so I don't know what exactly I mean by that, but I feel like this is a lesson learned. Like we no longer have institutions we trust. We don't trust so many different things. There will be consequences to this lack of trust, and some innocents are going. I think there will be, tragedy down in the future. I mean, it could even be something as simple as there's an actual pandemic
yes,
that comes again, and the CDC or the World Health Organization says da 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 da, and there'll be a whole slew of people who say, "Nope, you're not going to fool me again," and then maybe this time it is real and people die.
yeah,
I don't know what it's going to be, but this is not a good position for
no,
society to be in where we don't trust institutions.
no.
And I don't know how to build trust back, or do we have to build new institutions, or maybe both.
Yeah,
So
that's a hell of a question. I mean, I think yes. I mean, if COVID had been SARS and people were expecting that it was going to be, I mean, if it had been SARS, then hundreds of millions of people would have died. I mean, it would have been serious. I mean, SARS was very very nasty. It was like 40% mortality higher, I think. So yeah, and something like that could happen. But yes, I mean the question. It's a question that we, is sort of worth considering kind of more broadly, and even
Hmm.
in terms of religion. I mean, these institutions, these old ancient institutions that lose trust. I mean, the Catholic Church has a very difficult job to do
Huge
regaining
problem.
trust
Right.
because of the sort of pedophilia scandals and abuse scandals and all that kind of stuff that it was covered up, and it was covered up with the full knowledge actually of the highest levels of the church hierarchy. And so
Hmm.
what do you do? I mean, you have to provide some kind of demonstration that you've changed. You can't just people don't forget. I mean, especially not when you're talking about like children, people harming children.
Yes, exactly.
And that's exactly what happened in the pandemic too. I mean, children
Hmm.
were harmed, children were
Hmm.
sacrificed in a way. I mean, they've
I totally agree.
all sorts of studies, quantifying what we should have known and what some of us did know, which was that you take children out of school, you take them away from their friends, you stop them socializing, you put masks on their faces, you make them anxious, you deprive them of
They can't go to
interaction.
church.
Yeah, they can't do anything. They sit at home
No.
watching screens, eating junk food. Their health collapses, and I mean, there are studies that show that children who kind of came of age, or during the pandemic, they've faced all of these developmental difficulties. Like you only have one chance to go through these kind of developmental milestones as a toddler, and then a child and a teenager. And if you don't go through them properly, then you're actually left scarred for life. You don't
Yes.
develop properly, and we're going to have to reckon with these kind of developmental delays and this kind of suffering for for decades, for a generation. So yeah, I mean, how on earth you atone for it, and how on earth you show that things have really changed, and that you won't do this again, you won't make the
Won't
same
do this
mistake
again.
again. It's
Right.
difficult, but I mean, there are, I mean, it's good to have RFK Jr. in charge of HHS. I mean, he's done some interesting things with the vaccine schedule. Stopped recommending COVID
For
vaccinations
children.
for children, and for
Healthy children.
yeah, and
Yeah.
for pregnant women, and indeed actually
Right.
for adults, apart from adults over 65 who are at particular risk, from the virus. So there are changes definitely, but
Well,
yeah,
I'm one of those adults who's over 65. I'm not sure I have any of what they call, the comorbidity
yeah.
problems. But like my doctor was telling, well, Marty, you really, should have regular COVID vaccines. And I'm like, well, no, I just don't think I'm going to do that. And I'm like, he said, well, here's some studies. And I'm like, yeah, I just, no, I'm not, I don't. And I like my doctor. I think he's a
Mm,
great guy. And I think he legitimately believes the
mm,
study he's showing me,
yeah.
and maybe he's right, but it's just so hard. I talked to my wife, and she's like, "Absolutely not. We're not taking that garbage again. It's messes
Mm,
with your RNA and the DNA and the whole thing." And I'm like, "Okay, well, whatever she's read, she's taking that as the
mm.
gospel truth." And it's just, it's so hard to know what is true. That's all.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Well, and then what I find very strange is when people have some kind of adverse reaction, for example, to the vaccine, and they go on taking it. I mean, I went out with a girl whose brother ended up, I think he was in his late 20s, and he had a stroke, or he
my
had a stroke or a
goodness,
heart attack,
it was a heart thing. Yeah,
and
that's
he's still getting boosters. Yeah, and I'm like, look, you're. I mean, didn't speak to him about it because it wasn't my business. But it's like you're a 28-year-old man, like, and you've had a
should
heart
not be
attack.
having
You
this.
should not be
No,
having this in the first place.
right.
But people do persist in error. I think what we need to reckon with actually is just how wedded people are to error potentially. I mean, that's
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it's a real thing. People,
Yeah.
we have this sort of ancient conception, of man is seeking towards the truth. It's like the Socratic yen for knowledge and
Yes.
for what is good. And actually, there's a darker picture, I think, of what man is and what man actually will strive towards. And rather necessarily than sort of reaching towards the good, maybe people just don't want to be don't want to feel that they're wrong, so they'll actually persist in error in order
Right.
not to realize that they've actually made a mistake. It's
Hmm.
kind of twisted and dark,
It
but I
is.
think it's
It's
true.
kind of getting back to Genesis. It's sort of the fall. It's the
Mm,
original sin for the most part, right?
yeah,
Well, this is fascinating. I had no idea we were going to go down this road. Although I got to say, when I talk to people from England, they're almost always, more interesting and erudite than Americans. So maybe it's the accent. I don't know.
yeah.
Uh,
I think
I,
it fools people. I think the accent fools people. They think, oh, this guy is so he's so educated, he's so knowledgeable, and it's just the way we speak.
well, I mean, but obviously you got a PhD. Was that from Oxford also? So you
Yeah,
just okay. So that's very impressive, I have to say. And we've gone to Oxford and stayed there, and
beautiful place.
yeah, it's just that sense of the ancient that Americans. I mean, and I'm living in Las Vegas now, which is probably one of the least ancient places you
Yeah.
could possibly live. I mean, you can touch some of the Anasazi Indian things, and that's pretty cool because that's very, very old, ancient cultures. But you go to England, and like you say, every small town has a 1,000-year-old church in it or something. And we go to Italy, and there's a communal oven that they bake bread, and it's 1,200 years ago, and it's still there, and we're making pizzas or whatever. It's so much fun for Americans. You probably don't know what this is like, but for Americans to travel the world and see things that are so old, we're just not used to that at all. So
Yeah, well, it's our great it's a great treasure, I think, for Europeans. Actually, all this heritage that just I mean we take it for granted though. That's the
yeah, yeah.
thing. And sometimes actually I think you have to go away from Europe and come back to realize, okay, yeah, no, we really do have something that's worth fighting for, worth preserving.
Hmm. So tell me the story then. After you have this PhD, when did you get like? Were you always sort of a health guy? Were you always like exercising and working out and drinking raw eggs? Like when? Tell me that story.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I played a lot of sports as a boy and as a teenager. I was a martial artist in my teenage years. I actually taught kickboxing, so I was
Wow.
kind of pretty big into martial arts for a while. It's all a bit weird actually how I ended up as the raw egg nationalist. It's a strange story. I mean, I finished my PhD in 2018 and uh, went back to a kind of job in the literary industry that I'd been doing before I did my PhD, and but I was just posting on the internet, and I gradually kind of metamorphosed into into the raw egg nationalist, and was just posting about things I was interested in, things that had been kind of personal interests, that had been going on while I was, like while I was doing my academic work and that kind of thing, and that I then got into a bit more deeply after I left academia. But yeah, it's a strange transformation, and I think people finding out about it, people who knew me at Oxford, I mean, I've since my identity was revealed, people I was at Oxford with have contacted me, and I mean, they couldn't find it funnier, really. And I mean, I find it funny too. I mean, it's a crazy thing.
Well, when you were anonymous as
Mm.
the raw egg nationalist, do you feel like you ever overstepped the bounds because you were anonymous? Or do you pretty much stand by? Maybe obviously you have a track record of stuff
Mm.
you've said over the years.
Yeah,
I have no idea all the things you've said. I
yeah,
know
I don't
I've
either.
seen a few things that are okay. I've seen a few things of people saying stuff about you that seems,
Sure.
well, that doesn't seem possible. I doubt he's that bad.
Mm.
But like, I mean,
Well, I
do you
mean,
have anything you wish you hadn't dipped into?
no, no, not really. I mean, the unfortunate thing is that actually, I mean, there's a whole set of slurs and of terms that are used, to tar people who are right wing, and
Yeah. Well, you're a fascist, and you
yeah,
admit that, right?
you're a Nazi, you're a blah blah blah, you're this, you're that,
Right.
and when you're one of these things, you're all of them, right? So, I mean, it's the terms have kind of been robbed of any meaning, because there's
Yes,
no
I agree.
precision to it now. It's like, like once upon a time you were a Nazi if you held specific political beliefs and worshipped Adolf Hitler and all that, and now you're just a Nazi if you're right wing. So I mean, I think that being anonymous does I mean, it's an interesting kind of psychological experiment. It's an interesting experiment in personality, wearing a mask. And of course, we do know. I mean, people do behave differently when they wear masks. And I mean, I would stand behind all the kind of writing that I've produced. I mean, maybe I've a few tweets maybe might have been a little bit too edgy, but for the most part, I would say that actually I was just kind of giving expression to myself. And I mean, I live in the UK, and actually, freedom of speech is very definitely under threat here, and it's been under threat in
Yes.
in the US as well. And actually,
Right.
maybe a lot of people actually do have to don a mask in order to speak freely. I mean, things are really sort of hotting up over here at the moment. People are getting very, very, very angry. A lot of protests. A lot of anger at the Labour government. A lot of anger about the situation with the mass immigration in particular. Um, Refugees and migrants being housed in hotels in local communities, and causing a lot of sort of chaos and crime, and really bad stuff happening. And it's obvious that the British government actually isn't interested in the concerns of ordinary people, and really what they're actually saying is, if you speak out on Twitter, we'll send you to prison. And they have sent people to prison, for,
I
for
know. I
tweets. There
know.
was this lady,
For tweets.
Lucy
Yep.
Connolly, who was sent to prison for 31 months for a tweet that she deleted, that she wrote in anger. She was very angry after the murder of three young girls by the son of a Rwandan immigrant. She wrote an angry tweet, deleted it a few hours later, but she was sent to prison for 31 months for inciting violence and racial hatred.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, the anonymity thing, I think, is valuable, and I do think that I think it's used for good. It's obviously used for bad. It's used for bad. I mean, it's used to harass people. I mean,
Yes.
internet trolls do harass people. They do say nasty things to people. They do pester people and annoy people. But I think, nevertheless, the flip side of that is that actually you allow people in these oppressive societies, and societies where their freedom of speech and freedom of action is restricted. You actually allow people to say what they really think, to speak truth to power. So it's an important principle to preserve. You get the bad, but you also get the good.
Well, I sort of understand the raw egg side of things. You're advocating for healthier eating, and I'm not sure I've ever actually had a raw egg. I'm intrigued by like why that's a good thing. Uh, but then you put nationalist in there. So like nationalist is a trigger word, and like you
Yeah.
say, there's an imprecision now to how that word has been mutated.
Mm.
When you say nationalist, what is it? What do you mean?
Well, I just mean kind of basically putting the interests of your own nation first. A kind of concern for your own nation and your own people, which has been the default attitude of humans for the vast majority of human history. I mean, this is just
Right.
patriotism, essentially, is
Right.
what I'm saying.
Right.
But yes, I mean, nationalist is a very dirty word because of the history of the 20th century, events of the 20th century. But loving your nation is natural. Is what the
Yes.
majority of people have always been patriotic. And actually, people who don't love their nation today, they're the odd ones out. I mean, they present themselves as the kind of moral majority and the kind of pinnacle of progress. But actually, you know what? Like you are at radical odds with your own ancestors, with the people who raised you and who fought to create the society that whose benefits you enjoy, the safety, the freedom, etc. I mean, those people, your ancestors, they loved their country and they loved
Yes.
their people. It doesn't preclude caring about other people. It doesn't preclude caring about people overseas. it's just it's a grounding. I think it's a basic grounding, and I think without that basic grounding, things just go totally awry.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, well, as you know, we're back. The backlash has happened in America, so now we have the America First movement, which I think is spearheaded by Donald Trump, which I'm totally in favor of. I think we should have secure borders, and I think that people who hate America, who want to come here and benefit from American social programs while waving some other country's flag and burning the American flag.
yeah,
That's sort of like, well, I'm not sure that's what we intended for
no,
what it means to be American. And so at least we're now having this conversation, I believe, which is what does it mean to be American? And I think you guys in the UK have to be like, what does it mean to be English? What does it mean to be, your ancestry? Like, what does that mean? What does it mean to either participate in it or come over and just reject it wholeheartedly and try to replace it with something entirely different? That's where I see even just the West in general is being attacked from within
mm,
by forces that want to change the West into something completely different. And we have to start having a discussion about what it means to be Western and what our culture stands for, what our history is, and what we should celebrate, and what we should, be open to a certain amount of change. I'm not like one of these people that just wants to be isolationist, but this is the conversation we're having. But you guys are kind of on the front lines right now. And the latest news is pretty horrific. I think there's a Scottish girl with
yes.
her axe and her knife, and she's become this symbol. Like,
Mm,
tell me, what do you have any information about that? It's become a meme. It's
mm.
become a really important galvanizing symbol. What's true about that, and what's not true about it? Do you know at this point?
Well, I think you're right to say that it's a symbol. I mean, it is a symbol. We don't. So the girl has been arrested. So there was a man was filming a young girl, two young girls actually. One was 12 and I think the other was 14. And the 14-year-old girl was saying, "Get away from us, stay away from us," to this man who was foreign. You could tell he was foreign. You could hear from the way he was speaking that he wasn't British. And eventually, this 14-year-old girl pulls out an axe, like a hatchet, and a knife, and says, get away from us. Stop. I think she says, "Stop touching us." Anyway, this girl's been arrested for brandishing a knife, and yeah, it's not exactly clear what was going on, but I think looking at that as a symbol, I mean, that is a symbol. I think that image of a young girl being forced to defend herself and her friend, from a strange foreign man, with no help from the government, with no help from social
And then getting
services, the
arrested.
police, and then getting arrested. I mean, it's a symbol for the betrayal, I think, really, of the British people, and particularly British women. Because
Hmm.
I mean, I'm sure you're aware, and I'm sure your listeners will be aware of the terrible, terrible grooming gang scandal.
Yes.
Has taken place over decades, 30, maybe more years, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of British girls systematically targeted for sexual abuse, rape, and even murder by groups of Asian Muslim men, mostly of Pakistani origin, in towns and cities across the Midlands and the north of England. Like, it's an atrocity that actually would be more suited to a war zone. It's
Yes.
an atrocity on a scale like, the kind of like the tens of thousands of women who were raped in the Bosnian War, or
Bosnia. Right.
I mean, it really is like, it's not. This is not normal. This is something very, very, very. I mean, it's a terrible atrocity, and what's so bad about it is, or what's even worse about it is that actually, the authorities colluded in it. The police,
Yes.
social services, local government, and national government. It was covered up because it was so explosive, such a terrible indictment of the multicultural project. That actually people in power said, um, almost said, this is a price that we need to pay for the multicultural project to work. Like we need to ignore these girls being raped systematically because they're white, because they're English, because they're not a part of the, of the Asian Muslim community. We need to kind of put that to one side. We let's not look over there. Let's just look at the Britain's glorious future as a multicultural, multi-ethnic society. So yeah, I mean, I think that this girl, whatever the truth of the situation is, whether or not she's from a very poor, let's say, like a criminal background, because people are saying, oh well, she's obviously a criminal. If she's walking around with a knife and an axe, and it may very well be the case that she's from a bad family. But nevertheless, this symbol, I mean, it's
Right.
directionally true. It's like this
Right.
girl has this powerful symbol that this image has created. I mean, that stands for the betrayal of the British people and particularly British women. So
Yes.
I'm sure that we'll find out more about the case. But I think actually what is so powerful is the image itself.
Right. Well, I mean, this goes back to our discarded image
Mm,
conversation, where it almost doesn't matter if it's wholly true; it's metaphorically true. It represents something that is true on a level that even if the details in this particular case aren't true, now there's a symbol that I just don't think is going to go away. It seems very quickly, amazingly powerful, and it represents, like the woman that she just got, I think she just got released early from prison, Lucy.
yes, Lucy Connolly.
Yeah, and you know, this is one of those things where the conversation about what is free speech. What makes us in America wonder what's going on over
Yeah,
there, because you guys wrote the Magna Carta. I
I
mean,
know.
you
Yeah.
invented free speech, and now we hear these stories of some woman a block away from an abortion clinic just standing by herself and
Yeah.
praying silently, getting arrested for silent prayer.
Hmm. That's
Is
true.
that a true thing?
Yeah, it's not just her either. It's happened to multiple people. Yeah.
Okay.
It's crazy, and I'm very very grateful for JD Vance and Donald Trump making this an issue. I mean, they don't have to do it. They don't, I mean, the platform is America First, but actually, they have an expanded understanding actually of what America First means. Which is good, and they are actually they genuinely care about freedom of speech in Europe. So you had that
Hmm.
remarkable address by J.D. Vance at the Munich Security Conference, where he
Yes.
said to Europe's assembled great and good, the greatest threat to Europe is not Russia or China. It's you. It's
Yeah.
you people sat here in this room. You've betrayed your values. You've betrayed your history, and you will be the death of Europe if you don't change course. I mean, yeah, it's incredibly powerful. But you've also got Elon Musk. Uh, I mean, he's been tweeting a lot about this case with the Scottish girl,
Hmm.
about the grooming gangs. He's now saying that he wants to fund legal challenges and civil cases in the UK against the police and against the government. I mean, he's the richest man in the world. I mean, he doesn't have to care. He's got stacks of money, but he does
Hmm.
care. And so, I mean, I
Hmm.
think I think the people of Europe and the people of Britain are actually certainly the freedom-loving ones. Then we are actually very grateful for this renewed interest in our
Hmm.
shared in our shared heritage and history and our shared values.
Well, and in America, we revel in the melting pot idea, which has now, I think, been mutated into something like you say, the multicultural, to the point where this is not even there is no such thing as American culture. It's just this multicultural thing where there could be cultures that come in that are 100% antithetical to freedom-loving Americans, and I don't think that should be allowed
Mm,
as an option.
mm,
So we're finally realizing, yeah, my ancestors were Swedish and Irish, and everybody who lives in the United States comes from some other
mm.
place, but now we have this American culture that we should value and cherish and desire to see it flourish without just saying, "Oh, we're just going to 100% close all the doors and never let anybody else in, and we're done." Like that doesn't seem like the right solution. How do you see it in the UK in terms of you don't want to just say, "Yeah, here's the skin color, and you'll have to be in this skin color, otherwise you're out," right? I mean, that's what you get accused of
Mm.
because you're immediately put in that.
Yeah.
I saw something about you. You're a white nationalist,
Yeah,
and
of
I'm like,
course.
yeah, I don't think he probably is a white nationalist because I know I've been accused of that, and I'm not either. So,
Well, I mean, I get accused of not being white, so I'm either a white nationalist or I'm not white because I've got brown eyes and I mean, I'm on this kind of tan end of the British spectrum because I've got a lot of Welsh blood and Cornish blood in me. But
oh, okay,
um, yeah, I mean, I think it's. I think the cultural mixing is inevitable. I think that I mean the British have always been a great expansionary sort of outward, or certainly for in recent the last 500 years. We've been outward looking in very many in a really in a real sense. We've gone to the four
mm-hmm,
corners of the earth, and I think in many respects it's benefited Britain. I mean it pushed Britain to kind of global preeminence. It created the modern world.
yeah, the
Um,
sun never sets.
yeah, and I mean, there was 25% of the Earth's land surface was the British Empire. I mean, that was an incredible
Mm-hmm,
achievement. But
mm-hmm,
um, but yeah, I mean, we obviously do need to regain control of our borders. We obviously do need to start deporting people. I mean, I think that the Donald Trump victory, I think, will embolden, I think, patriots across Europe to actually to believe that they can do it, because that's the
yes,
patriotic people have talked about it for a long time, but actually now Donald Trump is doing it. So I think that yeah, I mean, I think that we face the same problems basically as America, which is that we've for decades we've allowed too many people into our country. We've allowed the wrong kinds of people into our countries. We've allowed a system. We've allowed the system to be gamed, but we've also allowed um, admirable ideals to be subverted. We've allowed these sort of ethnic enclaves to build up where people are totally isolated from the dominant from the broader national culture. And it's
right.
like in Minneapolis. I mean, Minneapolis might as well be Mogadishu,
Mm-hmm,
and it's the same in across the Midlands and the north of England. You have these ethnic enclaves where you might as well be in Pakistan. It's a translation of the way of life, and all you have actually is you have demographic replacement. You have these towns, you get an influx of people, and then the people who were living there move out, and then you've just got like an exclave of Pakistan in the Midlands of England. So I mean, I think the whole model really, I think, has to change, and I think it is changing in the US, and I think people, like you say, are becoming conscious of this question: what does it mean to be an American? And I think that's what's happening in Britain. We're asking, actually, what does it mean to be British? And that's a question that will be asked in every single country, I think, in Europe over time,
yeah.
and we'll see.
Well, the goodness of a melting pot to enrich your culture in by its very description, there has to be some sort of melting. There has to be some
Mm,
sort of desire to not be assimilated as much as add into this, wonderful stew,
mm,
and melt in and be part of it, and not. But like you say, the exclaves. I like that word. It's just like this is like, what is this? It's just a little piece of this completely other culture and
mm,
country just existing now.
mm,
I mean, there used to be Chinatown
mm,
or cool Asian markets or whatever, where you know, you could sort of participate in another culture within your own country. But it was the people who were doing that were wanted to be part of
mm,
the larger culture.
mm,
Like there was a desire to be assimilated and learn the language
mm,
and understand what it means to be American. while still retaining some of their unique identity, which I think is wonderful. But like once the identity itself is culturally on every point antithetical to the existing culture, that's where we have problems. And the wokes have tried to preach at us like we have to accept it without, if we don't, we're all bigots and xenophobes and all the rest. And it's like I think it's taken a lot of us a while to
Yes.
realize, okay, we're done acquiescing to that
Mm.
mentality.
Yeah. Well, I think it does take time. I mean, I think if you have a, we've had homogenous, high trust, high functioning societies where actually we've been permissive of one another. We've been liberal, basically. We've had a live and let live attitude. We let people, for the most part, go about their daily business as they choose, conduct themselves as they choose, so long as they're not harming other people. And when you're in that mode, it's actually very easy to be taken advantage of, and that is really
Yep.
basically what's happened. Is that we're
Yep.
we're coming to terms with the fact that actually we've been misled, we've been sold a lie, and things have to change. But that's difficult. It's a difficult realization, and it takes time. But I think it really is happening, and I think now that people are waking up to it, then actually things are probably going to change quite quickly.
All right. So I don't want to keep you too much longer. Would you mind? So you seem to be accused of also being like the British Andrew Tate,
Yeah, yeah.
in terms of being a misogynist. And like when you talk about masculinity and
Mm.
testosterone, obviously you're a fan of toxic masculinity, right? I mean, that's must be who you are. So here's your chance to like explain that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's a lot of nonsense talk about masculinity, and this toxic masculinity label. I think is really the kind of pinnacle of all of it, really, because actually when you look at what is being labeled toxic masculinity, it's just masculinity.
Right.
It's just the typical behaviors that we associate with men, that have been associated with men throughout history, not only in our culture actually, but in other cultures as well, and other civilizations too. And what they're essentially, what these people who carp on about toxic masculinity is saying is, we don't need masculinity at all, and men shouldn't actually have any kind of distinctive identity from women. And that leads us into all sorts of absurdities. It's led into the kind of transgender madness, and this idea that there are no biological differences between men and women, that it doesn't make a difference if a man suddenly starts competing in women's sports, and oh look, he's winning. He's like he's won the
What a
yeah,
shock.
he's won the 400-meter race by, he's 10 seconds ahead of his competitors. But there's no, so I mean, again, it's one of these, it's just one of these slurs, really. And I think it, in many respects, what it's designed to do is it's just designed to stop people from engaging with you. So it's like, don't read what the RAW EGG Nationalist says. Don't read his tweets. Don't read his books. He's a bad person, right? But actually, if you actually read what I say, I think and think for yourself, then you'll actually it'll be a different story. And I mean, a lot of what I write is actually addressed to women as well. I mean, I care about women, and I think that men and women need each other. We absolutely need each other. But that doesn't mean that men and women are the same. You can be equal but different, and I think men and women have equal protections and equal rights under the law, and that's good. But men and women are not the same, and actually society doesn't function properly when you treat men and women the same, and when you expect the same things out of them, and when you force uh, both of them towards this kind of asexual ideal. Basically, it is a
Right.
kind of asexual ideal. So,
Right.
but yeah, I mean, I write all the time about women's health. I mean, I want women to be healthier. I want women to be happier. I want women to be fertile. I don't want women to be harmed by toxic chemicals. So yeah, I mean, of course I will, and probably because I've shaved my head as well, then I probably get accused of being an Andrew Tate figure even more maybe. But actually, I mean, no, I mean, I'm not. I'm not just some like rank misogynist who is just kind of railing against women. I mean, I think women are great. I think men need women, and women need men, and
Yes. Yeah. Real
we
men, real women. Yeah.
we've forgotten so much basic common sense that has this kind of guiding wisdom that has allowed us to create this great civilization, and
Hmm.
a lot of that is about the difference between men and women and their respective roles, their strengths, their weaknesses, the way that they complement each other, the things that one sex can do that the other can't, and vice
Hmm.
versa. And
Right.
we need to rediscover those things.
Do you are you aware of Andrew Clavin? He's an American podcast guy.
I've heard of him. Yep.
He's an author, and he's written
Mm.
mystery novels, and he's done movies, and he's my age. He's a really I think he's great, but he talks about sort of the archetype that needs to come back and of successful storytelling in
Mm.
culture, in Western culture, which is a manly man meeting a womanly woman and coming together and remaking the world.
Mm.
And I just love that description because it's the foundation of so many, classically great, satisfying stories. And he's preaching the gospel of we need manly men and we need womanly women, and they need to come together. There's no future without remaking the world, which is having children. It's the the nuclear family, and we can there's not some new pattern we can impose upon society that will be good for society.
No.
We have to get back to, like you said, it's a common sense thing. So yeah, that's great. Well, Dr. Charles Cornish Dale, I love this name because it's Cornish Dale. It's just that you guys in Britain, you have such amazing names. They just seem so. Well, this is why I love Tolkien too, because I mean, you guys are the hobbits, right?
Yeah.
You know
It's
that.
the Shire. Yeah. Yeah. We are
It's
the
the
hobbits.
Shire,
Yeah.
right?
We have the hairy feet as well.
Well, thank you very much for being on the show today and opening my eyes to something that I didn't think was. I'm glad you like the music that I've
I
done,
love
so
it.
that
Yeah.
means we have another connection there. But we also your background and let me know if you ever do read some of the
I
C.S.
will.
Lewis
No,
stuff.
I
We
promise. I
should get
promise I
together
will. I
again.
promise I will, Marty. I promise I will.
All right. Well, thanks, Charles. I appreciate it.
It was a
Thanks,
pleasure.
everybody. That's it. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next week. Bye.